Welcome back to Adventures of a Black Belt Sommelier. Appreciate your joining us. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, I owned a restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee called F. Scott's. It was a nice restaurant. We had aspirations of being more. It was in a little strip mall in Green Hills in Nashville. I'd owned it it was a nice restaurant. Things were going well. We got a lot of good reviews. And we'd been open about a year when I read an article in Connoisseur magazine entitled Fishmonger to the Stars. This article was about a fishmonger in Stonington, Maine, named Ingrid Bengis, who had only 5 clients. Her clients were Thomas Keller, Danielle Beaulieu, Charlie Trotter, Wolfgang Puck, and Jean-Louis Paladin. No, I'm sorry. Jean-Louis Paladin. So kind of the Mount Rushmore of chefs in the United States at the time. What made Ingrid really unique was the fact that she only bought fish from day boats, so boats that went out and came back the same day, rather than huge trawlers that packed the fish on ice for weeks at a time. And she, in many cases, went out on the boat with the fishermen, and she would call her clients from the boat as they were hauling the catch in and tell them what they were catching that day. She would put together an aggregate order for the 5 clients, and she would select, if the aggregate order was 200 pounds of wolffish, she would select the best, finest, most perfect 200 pounds of wolffish and pack it up and ship it out. And so her clients would receive the next day fish that had been swimming in the North Atlantic the day before. So, I had to be part of this equation. So I called Stonington, Maine Information. Of course, this is before the internet. So I called Stonington Information and asked for Ingrid Bengis, got her phone number, called her. There was an answering machine message that this is Ingrid. Thanks for calling. I'm in the Soviet Union right now. If you need to order some fish, call my assistant Nancy, and gave me the phone number. As it turns out, I learned later Ingrid was one of the world's experts on Russian history. And she also wrote the Feminist Manifesto, which was one of the first books on female equalib books. So she was a really extraordinary person with a lot of interest. But when I called, she was in the Soviet Union. So I called Nancy and I said, I'm sorry to bother you. I know your phone's ringing off the wall because of this article in Connoisseur magazine. She said, what article? I don't know anything about any article. Well, Ingrid hadn't even bothered to warn her that this article was coming out. They didn't know anything about it. So I told her that I would be glad to fax her a copy. She said, well, there's only one fax machine in Stonington at the city hall. So she gave me the number and I faxed this article to her. And then I called back the next day and said, I'd like to be your 6th client. And she said, we really can't handle the clients we have already. We don't need another client. And she hung up on me. I called her back and said, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep calling until you say yes. So you might as well say yes now. And I said, what about this? Why don't I send you a check for $2,000 and you send me $2,000 worth of fish, whatever you think I would benefit from that day. So she said, okay. So I mailed off a check to $2,000 and then crossed my fingers that she would actually send me $2,000 worth of fish. 3 days later, I got a call from Delta Airlines that there was a box for me at the airport. Of course, this is before FedEx delivered to your door. So I went out to the airport, picked up this box. When we opened the box, there was just kind of an assortment of things in there, but one of the fish was still alive. It flopped out on the floor. There were some scallops that were the most perfect things I've ever seen in my life. We actually ate them raw. Didn't even serve them. There were sea urchins live, wolffish. She caught a lot of wolffish, or what the French call loup de mer. So we started doing some business, and it was a sensation. And I created a thing I called fish fax. I would fax my customers a list of the fish we had gotten from Ingrid that day and how we were going to prepare them at night, and encourage them to make a reservation. And 5 minutes after I sent these faxes out, my phone would start ringing and we'd fill up that night. It was Amazing. Of course, at this point, I've never even met Ingrid. Um, Ingrid came back from the Soviet Union and landed at, I think, John F. Kennedy Airport and called uh, Gilbert Lacause at Le Bernardin. I'm sorry, I screwed up the list of chefs. It wasn't Jean-Louis Paladin, it was Gilbert Lacause at Le Bernardin. And said, I just landed, love to come by and see you, have a glass of wine. He said, well, why don't you come by and have dinner with me in the kitchen? She said, okay. So in the meantime, one of Le Bernardin's chefs had been to lunch at F. Scott's and had taken a menu, one of our menus, back, on which it said that we were serving Ingrid's wolffish, Ingrid's scallops, Ingrid's lobsters, all these different mussels, things that we served that we bought from her. But we put her name on the menu with the items that she provided us. And so when Ingrid walked into the kitchen at Le Bernardin, Gilbert Lacause handed her our menu and said, who the hell are these guys in Nashville? They're buying fish from me. Well, she'd never heard of us. I'd been doing business with Nancy. She called the restaurant and I left for the night. She got our chef, Barbara Braggle, who was not exactly the most socially adept person in the world, on the phone. And Shorty, we called her Shorty because she was about 5'1", um, said something to Ingrid that insulted her. So she said, I'm never selling you any fish again as long as I live. Um, I called the next day and got that smoothed over. And we continued to do a lot of business with Ingrid. We bought a lot of fish. We pretty much had a box coming every day or every 2 days. Um, I don't really know what Barbara said to her that offended her, but who knows? Barbara was difficult, to say the least. Incredibly talented, but difficult. About 6 months into this enormously successful project, a friend of mine named Bill Danaher came to lunch and with a friend. And at the end of lunch, he said, if you don't mind sitting down, I'd like to introduce you to my friend. And I did. And I introduced myself. And Bill said, this is Josh Weekly. He's a chef and he'd really like to work for you. And I said, well, why? Why? He said, well, I live in New York now. I'm working at a New York restaurant, but my wife's pregnant. And I don't really want to raise our children in New York City. So she's from this area. I thought, and I've looked around and I think your restaurant is the best match for me. And so where are you working now? He said, well, I'm the chef de cuisine at Le Bernardin. So he's the number 2 guy under Gilbert Lacause at the best restaurant, the seafood restaurant in the United States. And he's already cooking Ingrid Bengis' fish. And Ingrid Bengis' fish is the backbone of our success as a restaurant. So I said, well, why don't you just go and put on your whites so you can go to work right now? Give me a minute to check you out, make sure that you really are the chef de cuisine de Le Bernardin. If you are, you're hired. We'll figure out what your position is and we'll figure out how much we'll pay you. Well, so he went back, gave notice, and about 6 weeks later, he started with us. Shorty kind of saw the writing on the wall, and she actually left us to be the executive chef for Lilith Fair, if you remember Lilith Fair. And Josh took over the kitchen. So overnight, we were basically Le Bernardin in Nashville because we were serving the soup de poisson, we were serving the sea urchins, we were serving all those dishes, those famous dishes Le Bernardin was serving with exactly the same recipes and exactly the same source for the fish. So we went from being a piddling little neighborhood restaurant of good quality to being a really, truly extraordinary seafood restaurant almost overnight. Thanks for tuning in to Adventures of a Black Belt Sommelier. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a great day.